Hello, my beautiful Lady Gardens, and welcome back to High Tea with Lady V, where we unapologetically spill the tea on all things womanhood, the weird, the wonderful, and the wildly under-discussed. Now, today's episode, strap in, because this one deserves a bloody movie deal. It's a story of resilience, fire, and more plot twists than a maths reunion. I am beyond honoured to welcome a dear, dear friend of mine, the beautiful and brilliant Louise Wilkinson. She's taken the time out of her day, and trust me, she's a busy powerhouse, to sit down with us and share a journey that's as jaw-dropping as it is empowering. Louise's story reminds us that behind every strong woman is a past she doesn't always speak about, but should. This is about reclaiming your identity, building your life brick by brick, and learning that hard times don't define you, they refine you. Welcome, Louise Wilkinson. Enjoy the episode. We have got Louise Wilkinson here from the podcast How to Hack Your Heartbreak, which focuses on healing women to heal and step into the best versions of themselves. Louise is a speaker, a life coach, and she owns a successful performing arts school. But Louise, your journey has been that of triumph, tribulation, trauma, and there have been some pretty big moments in your life that I have been part of. I am so excited to have you here on the podcast. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you, lovely. It is wonderful to be here, and I am absolutely loving what you're doing with High Tea with Lady V. I'm so excited to be asked on this podcast. You're killing it.
Oh, thank you. We are so excited to have you. I know we're not actually talking about your vagina today. That's pretty disappointing on my behalf.
Very disappointing. Yeah.
You have a pretty incredible story. It's amazing. I've been there for pretty much most of it. Louise and I met years ago when I was working for a professional football company. We forged a friendship from there, and there's been some ups and downs in both of our lives, but probably a few more ups and downs in yours. So when we met, you were training one of the performing dance teams.
Yes.
You had 2 young kids, and you were about to go through a divorce.
I was.
Yes. And that was a pretty hard time, especially when kids are involved and you've got to move out of the family home.
Yeah, it certainly was. You were actually part of that defining moment of me actually realising that this is what I needed to do. I can remember we were standing on a railing looking out at the back of the stadium.
Yes, I
and
remember
the game
this.
was on. I looked at you and I said, I need to leave, Kate. That led to a chain of events that obviously led to my separation. At the time, my eldest daughter was 7 and my youngest daughter was 3.
Yeah.
So it was a big step for me to make. I had married fairly young. I had only lived with my parents and then my husband. This was the start of a really big learning curve for me.
You also ran your business at the time out of your family home.
I did.
So had a big studio there. You were having to move your business as well. It wasn't just okay, this is going to happen, I'll move out. How does this look moving forward? There was a whole lot of other balls that were up in the air at the same time.
Yes, 100%. It was a very, very intense time.
Then you started to find your way as a single mum. I was there for that journey. You flourished. You really started to flourish. There were some ups and there were some downs, of course, as any divorce or separation is like.
Yes.
But you really started to come into your own. You set up your studio. I actually came back from overseas and started working for you there.
Yes.
And I remember I walked in and you were just white. And I'm like, are you feeling okay? Is everything all right? And you just looked at me and you sort of handed me this piece of paper. You've got to read this. Tell us about that letter that you received.
Oh, okay. Look, I need to apologise profusely for the fact that you just happened to be there at all.
Don't need to apologise for that.
Worst moments of my life. Kate is there, but I call her my earth angel because she gets me through. I had gone to work this particular day and there was an envelope that was under the door of the place that I ran my dance classes from. I sat down, I had about 5 minutes before my class started, and I opened this letter, and in it was this lady who wanted to know whether I was the Louise Wilkinson that was born on the 25th of December 1975, which is a fairly unique birthday,
yes.
at Canberra Hospital. And as I read the letter, she said, I gave up a daughter born on that day. This is what I know to be her name. She has an elder brother. And if this happens to be you, I'd really like to get back in contact with you. Here's my details. Which I guess for anybody is a very confronting letter to get. But in my case, my adoption had happened obviously in 1975, and it was actually through the government. And we now lump those type of adoptions in with the stolen generation. So they were called closed adoptions. The baby was handed over to the adoptive parents. Their original birth certificate was destroyed, and the government issued a new birth certificate with the adoptive parents on it.
Wow.
And their advice in 1975, obviously we have a lot more data on mental health now, but their advice was take the child home, raise the child as your own. If you don't need to tell them, don't. So when I opened this letter, this was actually the first time that the penny dropped that I was adopted.
Yes. And your dad worked with you as well. You're super close to your dad.
Absolutely.
His reaction, because he is just the most gorgeous man in the universe, was complete denial.
100%.
But that came from a place of love and loss for him that we kind of later were told about. You knew that they had lost a baby in a house fire just before you were born, but you didn't realise that they had lost that baby and then you had been adopted.
That's right.
Yeah.
That had happened in 1972. Their daughter had died in a house fire, really tragic, awful circumstances. They had then gone down the adoption route, and that's how I'd come into the family. Again, early 70s, coping mechanisms definitely weren't what they are now, and nobody really talked about it.
Yes.
There was one photo of her in the house, and I knew that I had a sister called Amanda, but I didn't know much more than that. And my brother was older and was cognizant of everything that went on, and he didn't really talk about it either. Obviously, when I came into the family, it was a huge blessing. There was never a day in terms of their relationship with me that I didn't feel like I didn't belong in that family.
Yes.
But physically, and I guess my personality, I always felt a little bit like a square peg in a round hole.
Yes. You always felt like a bit of an outsider. You would laugh with all of us because you'd come in, you're just so ethnic. You're this ray of sunshine. You're like, in a former life, Kate, I was definitely Italian. And then you find out that your heritage is actually Italian.
It is.
Yes.
One of our former colleagues I was arguing with them about something because we were all very passionate.
We were. Yeah, we were very passionate.
Yes. We were arguing about something, and he looked at me and he said, you're going to find out you're adopted, you're ethnic, and your parents are from Blacktown.
Yeah.
Well, the only thing he got wrong was actually they were from Port Kembla.
Yeah. And he was also ethnic himself. So he felt like he was literally arguing with his sister.
Yes.
You ended up going on a journey to meet your birth parents.
Yes.
Tell us about that journey and how you also included your dad along that path as well.
I have the utmost respect for my parents and everything they've done for me. The first step was making them part of the decision as to whether I actually step forward with that journey.
Yes.
I went and spoke with them. I said, you guys are my parents. I can investigate this, but I will be just as happy to leave it alone if it's going to cause you any pain. And I think my dad had actually, because we're so close, I think that he had forgotten that I was adopted.
Well, I think he'd blocked it out. Like he'd been through such a loss himself, and he was so petrified of losing you. Yeah. He just couldn't face that. You and him are, to this day, like literally two peas in a pod. Yeah. I think your mum was like, really, I don't even get a look in this relationship.
Poor mum.
Yeah, poor mum.
Sorry, mum. But look, mum really wanted me to find out. That every Christmas I used to think about how your birth mother was feeling on that day. I had their blessing, mum more than dad.
You actually had a little bit of a fractured relationship with your mum.
Yes.
And this brought you both together because she had wanted to tell you.
Yes.
Your dad had actually been the one that was wanting to keep it to himself. And it came from a place of love. I really want people to know that.
And her parents as well.
Yeah.
My grandparents, they were very much don't tell her.
Yeah.
They'd also had a situation where they knew a couple that they had gone through the adoption process with. They had met along that journey. And the father of that little boy actually tracked my dad down when I was about 7 or 8 and said, "Have you told Louise?" Dad said, "No, we haven't." He said, "Don't. We've told this little boy," I think his name was Matthew, and he's had a complete mental breakdown. He doesn't want to borrow us anymore. That was enough for Dad.
Yeah.
And putting it through that.
Putting it in perspective, we're in the 80s now. Still no support.
Yes.
Crazy stuff happened back then.
100%, yeah.
Wild.
Yeah.
Being a child of the 80s.
Yeah. I stepped forward on that journey and I met my birth mother. She was from Bathurst. She came down with her husband. I still remember the night before I had a little bit of a freak out. I rang my mum and I said, "I don't think I want anything to change." She said, "You can do this. We've got you." So I went, I met her, and I remember I have double jointed fingers. And she picked up my pinky finger and she checked if it was double jointed. That was a pretty special moment.
What emotions were you feeling when you saw her?
It was profound
Yeah.
because I could see myself in her, which, unbeknownst to me, I didn't know I was missing out. My brother is my parents' biological son. I just thought that I looked like a great Auntie Flo or something who was 5 foot tall and dark hair. I could actually see physical similarities. We were very alike. We were both very expressive. We definitely had moments where we'd put our bags down on the chair the same way or we'd pick up our cutlery the same way. Those profound things. It was very much a study in nature versus nurture.
Yeah, exactly. Because you didn't know.
Great.
Yeah. It's incredible. How did she respond when she saw you?
She was very emotional because she'd been looking for me.
Yeah.
She was in a situation when she adopted me out that I won't go into, but she had wanted to take me home and she wasn't able to. And she went on to be an incredibly successful teacher, assistant principal. She really did well for herself. I'm very glad that that's how that worked out for her.
She didn't have other kids, did she?
She did.
She did, yes.
Yeah. She then got married, I think it was about 6 or 7 years after I was adopted. I have 2 half brothers.
Yeah.
They're in their 30s. There was the 2 boys. She never had another girl. She was always very emotional at Christmas. She hated Christmas carols because it reminded her of
course,
me
because it reminded her of what she gave up and had
Yes.
to give up back then.
Yeah.
She then contacted your birth dad.
Yes.
And how did that go? What happened there? Because obviously they're not together anymore.
No.
She had to get in contact with him, find him, and let him know.
Yes. We couldn't find his contact details, but I think Peggy had somehow contacted one of the brothers and hadn't heard anything, so I followed that up with a letter to the brother. But what we didn't realise was that the brother and my birth father weren't actually in correspondence.
Right.
My mum that brought me up, sister, my auntie, also my godmother, got on Google and found him. I wrote a letter to him at work. He rang me within half an hour of opening that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. And was his family aware of you?
Yes.
You ended up meeting his family as well.
Yes.
He is ethnic. Did you feel like you belonged?
I absolutely did. I'm 5 foot flat. I'm not a natural blonde.
What? No, you are not.
I know.
Stop it.
Shock. I walk in and I meet my cousins who are all 5 foot flat. It was like the Italian Kardashians. And that was so profound. That actually got me really emotional.
Yeah.
To the point where before I'd actually met him face to face, he found a photo of me online and he sent it to his brother. His brother thought it was one of his daughters.
He's like your uncle's
Yes.
daughters. Wow.
That's how alike
That's
we
how alike you are. That's incredible. That would have been amazing. You've gone from not knowing any of this
Yeah.
to then having this huge extended family.
Yes.
Your parents and your brother, how did that change your relationship?
Look, it didn't. And I wouldn't have, we've talked about the fact that I understood my mother a lot more because I kept looking for physical similarities. Why has she got big boobs and I've got D cup? And why is she 5'9", I'm 5 foot flat. But once that all sort of fell into place, we actually got close. She passed away in 2014.
That wasn't long after you found
it was
out.
2011
Yeah.
when
Which
I
is
found
just,
out.
I think that's really special that she
Yeah.
got to get that off her chest
100%.
and develop that closer bond with you in those
Yeah.
final years.
Yeah, my family are unequivocally my family.
Yes.
And we're all very close. And if I thought for any reason that would in any way impede that, I wouldn't have gone down that road, because these people raised me and they loved me, and there was no difference. So it has extended my family, but it's also brought the family that I grew up with closer, I think.
And how did your girls react to this? Because I know that I was around for it. They were somewhat confused and somewhat excited, and they were only young. They didn't quite know what was happening.
Yeah, their first thing was they were very upset. They're like, "Does this mean grandma and granddad aren't my grandparents anymore?"
That's right.
That
yes.
was their big thing.
Yeah.
I'm like, "Of course not." Look, they came and met everybody, and it was mind-blowing for them, and just sort of rolled with it, I guess. They're of the same opinion that our family that I was brought up in. They absolutely adore their grandfather, and I think the three of us can agree he's our favourite person.
Oh, it's just the best. He's like my dad. Yeah. He's awesome.
They were obviously very confused to start with, but once they actually saw it in practice and realised that, yes, they were extra people to love, but that didn't take away from the love that they had that already existed.
And it didn't change anything for them. They didn't lose anyone. They actually gained. And then I'm at work and I get this phone call from you and you say, want to tell you first just so you don't hear it from anyone else. And the first initial thought was, I thought you were going to tell me that my husband was cheating on me.
Oh, my God.
I was like, oh, okay. What you told me next was a bit of a bombshell. And you told me that you had been diagnosed with an aneurysm.
Yes.
I was working at Royal North Shore Hospital with 2 ICU doctors at the time, and then not-for-profit. And it just so happened that one of them was there and got off the phone to you in a bit of a frazzle. And he said, are you okay? And I went, actually, no. My friends just called me about this. And he said, get her back on the phone. And so we had another conversation. We chatted about where it was, what was happening. And he left. And within moments, you were getting a phone call for someone else. Tell us about that experience, about how you found out, and then from you calling me.
I was at work one day and I started getting tingling in my right hand. And I just felt a bit weird, a bit spaced out and a bit dizzy. So I rang good old Dad.
Yeah.
And I said, I'm not feeling real good. And a dance studio operates basically from 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So I was at work by myself. No one was around. Dad is usually he's English and he's very stiff upper lip and he's very just get on with it. And on this occasion he didn't. He said, I'm going to call an ambulance. And I thought, oh, that's a bit of an overreaction, Dad. I'm just feeling a bit weird. Anyway, he said, I'm ringing an ambulance and I'm coming over. So he did that, and by the time he got there, the ambulance had been there, and every time I stood up, my blood pressure tanked. So they said, not sure what's going on, something's going on, we're going to throw you in the back of the ambulance and we're going to take you up to the hospital. They took me up to the hospital. Of course, they were concerned that I had weakness in my hand and that I was feeling quite dizzy and quite disorientated, almost like a vertigo. They said, look, we're going to do a brain scan with CT scan.
What was going through your mind at this time?
Oh, I was out of it, to be honest. I was really disorientated. What they were basically doing was testing for stroke. When they actually scanned my brain, they found that I wasn't, in fact, having a stroke. It was a thing called a migraine anomaly, which can happen once in every 200 migraines, and it presents like a stroke, but it's a normal migraine.
Yep.
That was what was going on. But when they were wheeling me back to the room, I felt like the nurses diminished. Something had changed, the air had shifted. Where they were joking and laughing and that sort of thing on the way up, they were doing the same thing on the way back, but there was a brittleness to it. And I was like, something's up here. they drop me back to my emergency bay. The doctor comes in and he says, well, the great news is you're not having a stroke. This is a migraine, that's what it is. We'll give you some migraine tablets. You'll be right as rain. I'm like, great. So I go to get up. And he said, there has been an incidental finding, though, when we scanned. And I said, what does that mean? Like, incidentally, I saw Mabel down the street. And an incidental finding means that they find something when they're not looking. And he said, you actually have a quite large brain aneurysm that we found on your scans.
I can't even imagine what would have been going through your head.
Oh, I just was like, what? Because what we know about brain aneurysms is that usually you hear the expression, such and such had a brain aneurysm and they died.
Yes. We were just having that conversation before.
Yes, that's usually what people's understanding of brain aneurysms are. People do, in 90% of cases, die when the aneurysm actually bursts. So the aneurysm is actually a irregularity, like a balloon in the artery. It's a weakness in the wall of the artery that grows and grows and grows. And like if you were to put water in a balloon and kept blowing it up and blowing it up and blowing it up, eventually the top of that balloon would get so thin that it bursts.
It bursts through.
And that is, in most cases, fatal.
Because you're bleeding. You're uncontrolled bleeding in the brain. Your brain's not getting oxygen.
Yeah, that's right. So they had found mine unruptured, which, while it was shocking, was also incredibly lucky.
Yeah, blessing.
They had to do further testing. And they did an MRI and then they did an angiogram where they actually went up into my brain through my groin.
Yep.
And they said, look, it's big, it's irregularly shaped, it's ugly, and the position that it's in, you're going to have open brain surgery. Not what I wanted to hear.
No, not really what you're wanting to hear as a single mum who runs her own business. No.
And then being in a regional centre, we do have brain surgeons, but those brain surgeons aren't specialists in aneurysms, which is a microsurgery. You're working on an artery. And the wait was incredible, ridiculous. At any time, this thing could burst.
Like, I could not believe that they had sent you home. And this is where I think we make out that the Australian system is so amazing, and yet they send someone home with a very large aneurysm, which is actually very likely to burst, and they say, we'll see you in 3 months' time.
Yes.
They kind of just left you. And when you called me, I went, okay, she's got an aneurysm, this isn't good. But seeing the look on Roger's face, the doctors love to keep that sort of stone look, but I was like, something's not right here. He's not liking the place it is, how big it is. And it was very much, I think, placement for him. Like, he was like, we don't want to have aneurysms here. And it just really gripes me that if that had been left, what could have happened? And this is where the regional, and I mean, it's really, we're not in a regional area. It's actually quite a big city, and we actually service more of a greater span than what some of the Sydney hospitals actually service.
100%.
And you were sent home with a letter and a referral and didn't hear anything back from the hospital.
No.
So you called me. I've spoken with my boss at the time. He's got someone to call you. And what did they say to you?
Get in the car.
Yes.
Basically.
And I remember you going, no, I've got kids in a business. And I'm like calling you going, get in the car. This isn't good. Get in the car. Drive to Sydney now. You have to get in the car. And I think you were there 2 days later.
Yes.
Is that right? Or the next day? I think he was going to see you that afternoon.
Yes.
And you actually couldn't get there. It is a 2-hour drive.
So
the next afternoon that your doctor saw you, and he wanted to have you in surgery the next day.
Yes.
Yep. Which you tried to put off.
I did.
Yes.
Well,
because you're still trying to process all of this.
If you remember, I had to move out of my house.
You did too.
Remember?
Yes. Oh my goodness, you were moving at the same time. I forgot about that.
Yes.
And you were still finding a house to rent. We had to find you a place to rent.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, sorted that.
My goodness. Yes, I forgot about that.
Well, part of the reason I couldn't go was like, I've got an inspection on this house.
I know. We're like, no, you need to get in the car. Otherwise, you won't even have a house to inspect.
So your beautiful husband was like, how about you just go into brain surgery and I'll deal with it.
We'll pack it up. We had people, you had friends come around. They were packing it up. You brought the kids down to Sydney. They stayed with me. Let's not talk about the fact that your daughter ended up in emergency after slicing your finger off. But, you know, that's another story. Sorry, your mum's having brain surgery and your daughter's slicing her finger off.
You shouldn't have made her cut that pumpkin.
I know. You've gone in. Obviously, it's very confronting. You're going in and they're saying these things could happen. What were you told?
I was told that it was an extremely risky operation, that I could not make it through. I could have brain damage. I could have major deficits in terms of the use of my limbs, because the heart is, when we talk about heart surgery being serious, and it absolutely is, but the heart is a fairly robust organ and it's also very predictable in what it's going to do, right? The brain, not so much. You can do everything textbook and the patient still comes out with brain damage.
Exactly.
They had to prepare me for that, and they also had to prepare my daughters for that.
Yes.
So they actually had to take them and sit them down and say, your mum might not be like your mum after
when
this
you come
operation.
out.
Which must have been absolutely terrifying for them.
Yes.
Yeah.
I remember them being at my house and they were actually, they were putting on a brave face.
They were.
Yeah, they really were. And I remember when we got the phone call that you're okay, and they were just in tears.
Yeah.
They were so happy about it. Or everybody was, obviously. Obviously hadn't completely come out of it, so there was still a risk. But we went up to the hospital and we saw you, and I get emotional now. Seeing you like that, you know, that was tough. And I can't imagine what that was like for you girls.
Yeah.
Because that was hard. You had staples all up here.
Yeah.
Everything had been taken down. You'd been stapled back. I mean, he'd done a very good job.
Yes.
But that was tough. You're in so much pain.
Yeah.
But
Because it was ICU.
We came into ICU.
Yeah.
Because, you know, obviously they wanted to see you. But I just can't imagine what that felt like for them. And I, you know, especially having kids that age now.
Yeah.
At the time I seen it was, you know, not even 2. Yeah. It's a different experience when they're that young, but where they are now, that would have such a profound impact on them. And seeing their relief that, like, we knew you were okay because you were out of it, but you could still kind of somewhat converse with us. You would have no idea what you were saying. It was a lot of moaning, but you knew we said the girls are here. We said this was what was happening, and you were coherent as you were expected to be in that time. Yeah. Yeah.
I can't remember a lot of that. I can remember spewing on my godson.
Yes.
Because he was there. But yeah, I can remember seeing Dad when I first opened my eyes, which is what
Yes.
And then the girls, and then being sick on my godson, which I've never lived down.
Yeah, fair enough. You had brain surgery. That's okay. I think you're excused. And you also had both your birth parents there as well, which I thought was quite special.
Yes.
I know that added a bit of a different dynamic, but it was, I think, a special moment that they were involved in all of that and caring so much as well. So we've got through that. And you actually came out of that pretty quickly. It was pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And I remember the surgeon had said to you, he had operated on some other individuals where they'd had aneurysm in the same place as you, and it had burst. And he said, your outcome is so much different than theirs.
Yeah.
And he said it was so thin that it was pulsating. It was about to burst. It was about to rupture.
Yeah.
What were your thoughts when he told you that?
Look, I don't think I processed that at the time. And I think with this time, what's actually funny is that everyone else remembers things better than me.
Yes.
I mean, I was just, not only was I recovering from brain surgery, but I was switched on. I didn't.
Your short-term memory wasn't as good though initially.
No. And, you know, and I was obviously on some pretty heavy painkillers.
Yes.
So other people remember
pieces
of it. I don't think I had the reaction that I'm having actually listening to it now that you're reminding me of.
Yes.
I had actually forgotten that.
You've forgotten that.
Yeah.
God, and see, that's a piece of information I haven't forgotten, because what made me so much more angry about it all is 3 months after you had the operation, you get a letter from John Hunter Hospital saying,
Yes.
oh, we're ready to see you. You can
Yes.
come in and have your operation now. And I was like, are you fucking kidding me?
Yeah.
You would have died waiting for them, because their neurosurgeon was on holidays, which is fine. He can go and have a holiday, of course. But they need someone else in to actually replace that. It just makes me so angry, because not everyone is going to have a friend that has a friend that knows a neurosurgeon. That was just an absolute fate of events there.
100% it
like
was.
I had taken a job that I never really would have taken. It was just, I had a passion for the industry. I took quite a junior role in that job because I wanted flexibility. I just had a child and was going back to work, and it gave me that flexibility. It gave me that passion of an industry it's more about health and wellness, and it gave me those connections of working for some amazing individuals. And you think, how many people are waiting and don't make it?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a real thing. Not only was that letter was just for the first consult. That wasn't even, we're going to operate on you soon. That was coming for the first consult, and we'll talk about the possibility of when we can maybe fit you in to be operated on.
It just
3 months after I'd actually had the surgery.
This is where the medical system lets people down.
Yeah.
And we think it's there to look after us. It's not always there to look after us.
No.
There's budget cuts, there's budgeting. I mean, I think the MRI machine at Maitland, you can use it twice in a week. That's what they've got funding for.
Wow.
I know, what a freaking waste of an MRI machine. Yet we think that we've also supported.
Yeah.
And it's just not right. How you have to advocate for your own health in this country is really poor. You've gone through that. You've gotten over that very well, I must say.
Cute.
And your youngest daughter, who is now
21.
I can't even say those words. Remember when she was putting beanie bears on Gavin when she was 6?
She was 4.
Oh, she was actually 4.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I don't even need to contemplate that. Money, you weren't even born. S, your youngest daughter is at work and she's hit at high speed by a car.
Yes.
And she is also lucky to be alive.
100%.
She spends 8 weeks in hospital, 6 months learning to sort of walk and get strong again.
Yes.
Tell me about that journey.
Okay. My daughter, Bella, is a really hard worker and she wants to get ahead in life. She took a job as a traffic controller, which is good money, and she was on a night project, which obviously came with penalty rates and all of that sort of thing. She was actually really enjoying it. The crew were people she considered friends. She was on the road this one night, and there's protocols from the police that if a police chase is coming through the work site, they usually get a call from the police base, which is then radioed to all of the traffic controllers, and they jump in their trucks so that there's actually no people on the road. What had actually happened in this case was that there was a guy who had run a red light inside the signage of the construction zone, and the police were behind him and put the lights on. This guy, unbeknownst to them at the time, was in a stolen vehicle and was also carrying drugs. So he went, I got to take off from these people. He went into the lane that Bella had cordoned off from traffic. She was standing in front of a boom gate that let the trucks in and out of the construction site, and he barreled straight through her and the boom gate. She went 20 metres down the road. Her hat flew off halfway down, and obviously that was a major incident, a major police investigation. She was conscious through the whole thing, and when they got to the hospital, they actually put her in, obviously, a scanning machine and found out that her pelvis was absolutely pulverised from the impact of the car hitting her. And she was in so much shock that she wasn't actually feeling any pain. They just thought that she'd broken her nose and maybe a knee injury. It was all looking okay until they put her in the scanner and went, oh my God.
Yeah, look at her pelvis.
She had pelvis, she had a lung contusion, and then obviously her face. I get the phone call and rush up to the hospital, and that was surreal, because as I'm going up to the hospital, I'm listening to the news that's saying the Jesmond roundabout is shut down in all directions. A traffic controller was hit by a stolen vehicle overnight, and I know this is my daughter.
Yeah.
And I'm driving up to the hospital, and I tell you the moment that I got really scared was that I ran into emergency, went to the triage nurse. Now, look, we love nursing staff. You know, we do.
Triage nurses are great. I feel for them. It's a high.
I do too. But, you know, they take no shit.
100%.
So they're usually like, name, yep, sit down, we'll get you when you're ready. So I went up and I said, my daughter's here. And she like looked at me almost like she was chewing gum, but she wasn't.
Yep.
It was like, name. And I said, Isabella. And she jumped out of her chair like someone had put a hot poker up her backside, right? This way. And I was thinking in that moment, what the hell am I walking into?
Yes.
Because her reaction was enough to tell me
it was serious.
It was serious. So I walk in, she's got a neck brace, she's got blood all over her face. They've got her so that her pelvis can't move, because it was that broken that they were worried that any movement would actually lacerate internal organs.
Or hit a femoral artery.
Yeah. So she was so lucky none of that happened. And that she had gone that far, lost her hat halfway down, and had no head injuries.
Yeah.
She hit a nose, but it didn't actually have any impact on the brain.
Which is incredible.
My mum was a very bossy woman, and I firmly believe that she was up there directing, like, no, this is not her day.
Yeah, this is not happening.
Yeah.
This is not going on, not under my watch. So how was that journey from seeing her in the hospital to, she also had to have her 21st birthday in the hospital,
She did.
which was really hard for her. How was that journey for your family as you worked through that?
We're still on it.
Yeah.
This happened in July 2024.
Yeah.
It still is such a journey. She was in hospital. It was a certain bubble. She was having things done for her. She got quite close to the ENs where she was staying were brilliant. She was the youngest in there by something like 50 years. She formed quite a rapport with them. But I think that her brain had gone, let's just worry about the physical injury and we won't deal with the mental stuff until later. The brain can do that. That side of it is actually still being processed.
Yes.
She becomes aware with every challenge that she has. For example, she is back to work, which we're so grateful for, but she can't be back on full duties for at least another year.
Yeah.
She's frustrated by that. And she's sort of still trying to find a place. She doesn't feel useful. She's in pain a lot. She comes home from a night and she's all outwardly very happy. I'm fine. Don't mollycoddle me, blah, blah. But she comes home and she's sore. And she's tired and she's cranky. And she's all of those things that as a family, we're still processing.
Yes. You're still having to navigate what that normal looks like now.
Because it's different.
It is different. That's a traumatic event to go through, both physically and emotionally 100%. For everyone involved. I know your eldest daughter was like, I'm just going to control this because I actually can't control anything else.
That's right.
I'll look after the family, so to speak.
Yes.
Because everybody deals with everything in a different way.
Yeah.
And where Bella, she's more, okay, everyone can kind of do their own thing until it really affects her. And she's like, okay, this is not working for me now.
Yeah. So both Bella and myself have been diagnosed with PTSD.
Yeah.
Because it was just such a...
shockingly traumatic. Yeah.
I was like, wow, okay, I think I've done okay with all of that other stuff that I've only got the diagnosis now.
Yes. I feel like there might have been some PTSD from like everything else.
But yeah, here we are. And we're still working through those
challenges. And then through this too, you're being assessed for ADHD.
Yes.
And we're both laughing about how our parents keep making excuses for it.
100%. So they won't need.
Yeah, just no, you're fine. There's nothing wrong with you. You're like, it's not that there's anything wrong with me, but knowing gives you a lot of clarity about yourself. I know for myself, knowing it actually gave me forgiveness of the things that I didn't know why I couldn't do.
Yes.
I think that's really powerful, whereas they were seeing it initially as a negative thing. You know, you're not a hyperactive boy.
Yeah, well, they call our generation the lost generation in terms of ADHD because probably less, I mean, you know, you're more youthful than I am, but particularly I know for a fact that when I was at school, there was no data on girls.
Yeah, I don't think there really was in the 80s either.
Yeah.
Like, it's just a boy thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there was no data on it. Girls weren't diagnosed.
And it
with
was also
ADHD.
considered a really bad thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's different now. I think we're really grasping the fact that it's nothing bad. It's just a different way of processing, thinking, learning, whatever it is, everyone's unique. I feel for those kids too that were diagnosed with it young, when we were young, that they were considered bad. They're like, oh, yeah, we're so sorry, they're your kids. And that's a shitty message to give kids that
100%.
are probably super intelligent, just can't sit still and are bored shitless, sitting there learning their times tables off by heart. They're like, let's run and learn them. Let's do it a different way. And I feel like our generation, now that they're knowing about it and then seeing it in their kids, are making a change.
Yes. Yeah, I'm still on that journey. So I've been diagnosed with it. And then obviously I have to go through the testing, like the blood tests and the ECG.
Yes.
All that sort of thing before I get the medications. That's a couple of weeks away, my second appointment. But yeah, trying to get my dad to, we actually found a report.
Yes, I know. I had to get my reports out too.
Yeah. And it just screamed.
I know. Yes, I was the same. And my mum, bless her, even in her state at the time, because as we know, my mum has dementia, and she's still going, oh, Russell, don't be ridiculous. She was crazy. She was nuts and never applied herself. And I'm like, you know, hang on. We can be slightly nicer too.
It's true. You know, we were both nuts, didn't apply ourselves, but
we applied ourselves to things that meant
we
to us.
really liked. Yeah. And we're both fairly intelligent, so we got away with it.
Yeah.
We've done all these creative pursuits and we know so many things about so many, I mean.
A lot of useless facts. I tell you what.
100%.
It's just, the bar.
I'll be interested to start that journey of medication if I can channel this creativity in just an actual order and be productive, not just busy. There's a difference.
Yes.
What can I achieve? I'm kind of excited.
That was me. I was really excited about having, obviously there's therapy tools that you can go down as well, but having another tool to be able to go, right, it's time for me to work now. Yeah. And I find my eyesight, when I used to talk to people, I had to train myself to look people in the eye. And when I take the medication, I could look people in the eye for quite a long period of time. It wasn't until a friend said to me, I know when you've had your medication. I was like, really? Like how? She's like, you look me in the eye when you speak to me.
Yeah, well.
Yeah, okay. And it wasn't me, it probably was me drifting off. Like, oh, yeah, there's a butterfly over there. It enabled that focus so much more. Yeah. I've tried a few different ones and I've tried different counselling and everything. But I've gone down the route of microdosing and long acting. It's a personal journey of what works for you as well. And there's some great podcasts to listen to, one by Huberman, who actually explains the drug and the drug mechanism in the brain. Right. And he says that you can, through neuroplasticity, actually learn to be focused when you have the help of some of the medications. My daughter started microdosing it again based on his podcast because it's so informative, because you're kind of just given a pill and go, okay, yeah, just give this a go. Whereas I think it's about exploring what works for you. I highly recommend for anyone out there and yourself to listen to the podcast, because it really goes into the mechanics of what works and why it works. Yeah.
I will. I'll be throwing it all the way home.
Exactly. You'll be like, right, I'm listening to that.
Yeah.
So I'm surprised you don't have more PTSD. Seriously, that is a lot to have put into such a small life.
Sharing our stories is so important.
I think that's the take home here, you sharing what you've been through, because everyone's got a story, and you can be out, someone could have road rage and you're like, what the hell is wrong with them? But you don't know what their story is. They could be driving to the hospital like you had to go and see your daughter after a major accident.
Yeah.
We've all got a story, and I think by sharing them, it makes everybody else feel a little bit more normal.
Yeah, it's so important to keep having these conversations as women.
Definitely. Because one woman's journey through what you've gone through is going to be completely different for another woman,
right.
and how they deal with it. Everyone's got a different way of processing things. And I think that's what is so important. And be it medically or be it emotionally, it's not about comparing yourself to go, oh, well, she went through it like that, so why aren't I? Everyone's different. How your body responds is different as well. You've got to share those messages and be open and honest. Lou, thank you so much for coming on and sharing such personal information. Now, we will ask you one last question. So we pull a question out of a teapot. You pulled your question out earlier. If your vagina could talk, what do you think it would say about you? I mean, I've got some ideas, but...
You do too much. Shane, look, I would probably say, it would say to me, we've had a great time together, but my God, you've made some poor choices. You had fun. Oh, you made some poor choices.
I'd probably agree with that. Thank you so much for sharing, and I totally look forward to listening to your podcast. We'll drop it in the notes, and if you need some advice about resilience, this is the lady to talk to. Thank you very much, Lou.
Oh, lovely to be here. Thanks, Kate.
See you. Ladies, if you loved this episode, please share it with your girlfriends, your group chat, or that one mate that always pees a little when she laughs. Head over to Apple Podcast or Spotify and give us a cheeky rating. Unless you're high up in Hunter New England Health and I've thrown you under the bus twice this episode, in that case, look away, nothing to see here. And remember, knowledge is power, power is wisdom, and a wise vagina is an informed pussy. So water those lady gardens because they are worth it. Signing out from Pussy HQ, cannot wait to see you all next week. Please note that this podcast is for entertainment purposes and informational purposes only. The content shared is not intended as medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always consult a qualified healthcare provider for any medical concerns or before making any health-related decisions. The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are those of the host and guests, and it does not represent those of any medical organisation or institution.